Good morning. I am very sorry to report that we are continuing to experience issues with Blackboard Collaborate. In the meantime, I need to make sure you guys get this information. So it is to your benefit that I just record it. I can't push the test and our lessons back any further, or we'll be too far off track to ensure that we get everything done. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our lesson on 1.14. This will cover what we need to go over in test part 2. The mission of the Michigan Virtual Charter Academy is to provide an innovative, intensive academic preparation that inspires and educates students to achieve the highest levels of academic knowledge and skills. Michigan Virtual Charter Academy embraces a collaborative partnership between teachers and parents in order to empower students to reach extraordinary heights. Extraordinary results require extraordinary efforts. Through commitment, hard work, consistency, and responsibility, every student will meet the challenge of mastering high expectations. Okay, test expectations. Your part 1 of the test is multiple choice. However, your part 2 is written, and there is an essay component to this, so you need to make sure that you're paying very close attention to the prompt and following along with this rubric. And we've seen this rubric before. We know what it requires of us, and therefore I want you guys to make sure that you're paying attention to it. To receive full credit, you have to have responses that are relevant and historically accurate. So make sure you're utilizing the information that we've covered so far. I know you can do it, and I know you have it, so just remember to use your notes diligently. You have to provide complete explanations and excellent details that support the topic, and you need to demonstrate a thorough understanding of the topic. Stay on task when you're doing this, okay? All right, the response. For question 2, you're going to need to respond in an essay form. Remember, an essay is 3 to 5 paragraphs. They don't have to be super lengthy, but they should be at least 3 sentences per paragraph. For your question number 1, you just need to respond in a paragraph. A minimum of 1 paragraph. You can go up to at least 3 or more, but definitely a minimum of 1 paragraph to respond. You could also choose to do it in an outline form using details. We've talked about what an outline looks like. We did a couple of examples, so you can certainly utilize that as well. Again, question 1, 1 to 3 paragraphs. There's no set length on how long this should be, but it needs to be as detailed and fully answer the prompt as possible. Your second question needs to be in 3 to 5 paragraphs. You need to have a start and an end, which is an intro and a conclusion. So intro, body, conclusion, and that will be your essay for the second question. The first question, let's break it down a bit. What do we know about China? Well, we've talked a lot about how isolated China was, and there's reasons for the isolation. We remember that there's the desert to the north, there's the Himalayas to the south and to the west, there is ocean to the east, and there's plateaus and other high region areas all throughout China. So it made it very difficult to communicate and trade with other civilizations. They became very, very isolated amongst themselves as well. We have the Yangtze River and the Huanghe River. We know that these were vast areas that separate different civilizations within China as well as from other civilizations. We know that they developed a lot of different languages to begin with because they were so isolated from other Chinese civilizations. And it wasn't until they developed their early Chinese system of writing that they began to unify. But that early system of writing was only accessible to those with a higher education and generally the wealthy, simply because it was such a difficult language to learn. We know that the characters of that language that are still the same symbols that are used today in Chinese writing. We know geographic features, they kept them isolated. So again, let's talk about some of those features. We have the Gobi Desert to the north. We have the west are the Himalayas and other mountains as well. We've talked about some of the other mountain regions. To the south and east, we have the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and the Yellow Sea. Within China, we have the 2 main river systems, the Huanghe and the Yangtze. So write that down, make sure you understand the geography, because talking about the geography itself, talking about the Gobi Desert, talking about the seas to the south and east, talking about the Himalayas, you want to mention all of those as geographical areas that caused China to stay isolated. The big key here is China was isolated. So how did the geography of China affect the development of early civilization there? It isolated it from other civilizations. Nomadic herders settled in the North China Plain, and they built villages and did some farming. They chose the plain because it was covered in a thick layer of wind-blown yellow dust called loess. We talked a little bit about that. It was one of our key vocab terms. Northern China is also quite hilly, and so the people cut terraces into the yellow slopes to create level land. In the Huanghe Valley, they grew millet, a grain that's used for making crackers and porridge. South of the Huanghe Valley, another Chinese civilization had begun to develop, and it was around this third longest river in the world, which is the Yangtze River. In the marshy land of the well-watered valleys, farmers learned to grow rice, and we know that that's still a main crop of China today. Because the Chinese farmers could grow a surplus of food, people were free to do other jobs, and thus becomes that division of labor. They started weaving baskets, making cloth, fashioning pots to store grain. We find that they developed silk. All of these come out of the surplus of food. Because they're able to grow so much food in their well-fertilized areas, they don't need as many people to work the farms because they have new inventions to help them with the farms. So people can begin doing other tasks. Remember, we talked about what a food surplus leads to. If you have a surplus of food, that leads to trade, because you use that extra food to trade with other groups in order to get materials from them that you might not have had. That trade leads to cultural diffusion, meaning writing, language, technology, all of that gets transferred back and forth between the cultures that you're trading with because you have this exposure to them. Now, once China starts trading first among its own civilizations within China, it starts to traverse those large rivers through the Himalayas, across the seas, and it's trading all sorts of goods. And as we move several hundreds of years later, we find that the exploration time brings lots of people to China in order to get spices, silk, fireworks. All of that becomes a big commodity for China. So you want to talk about why China was isolated. Take some time to write down what you know. Why was China isolated geographically? What were the geographic features? The Gobi Desert, the Himalayas, the seas, the large rivers, the plateau, the plains. Talk a little bit about each of those, where they were located in China, and why that made it cause them to be isolated. Then talk about what developed because they were isolated. So an effect of them being so isolated caused them to be good farmers because they cut terraces, they grew grain, they learned how to grow rice, they developed their own writing system. Those kind of things all come out of the fact that China is isolated. Okay, your second question is a little bit more in depth because you have to kind of break it down into an essay format. We have already done a compare and contrast essay. You guys know how to do this. I have full faith in you. Remember, comparing, you're looking at the things that are similar. Contrasting, what's different. So, there were many empires that rose and fell between 2300 BC and 334 BC. Write a brief essay, remember 3 to 5 paragraphs, that compares and contrasts the Babylonian and Hittite empires. In what ways were they alike and how were they different? So we're going to start with an intro. We'll move into our body paragraphs. How were they alike? How were they different? And then we do a conclusion. We have not talked too much about them because we were focused on our other civilizations for our first writing assignment, but you should have gone through the lessons and done your book reading to learn a little bit about them. What was similar? Well, we know that both Hammurabi of Babylon and the Hittite rulers established political power by using their powerful armies. They conquered their neighbors, especially around the Fertile Crescent. They both undertook huge building projects. because this helped them demonstrate their power, wealth, and authority. Both the Babylonians and the Hittites carried an extensive trade with their neighbors. They borrowed various elements from their culture. That brings us back to that term, that cultural diffusion. Because they're trading, they're sharing things back and forth, they're giving their culture, their language, their writing systems to the other society, and they're taking some of that civilization's traits and incorporating them into their own. Particularly the cuneiform language, that was spread back and forth through trade. And both civilizations had a written code of laws. Remember, we talked about the first written code of laws, the Code of Hammurabi, Hammurabi being Babylonian. So we've got these first civilizations developing a rule of law. They were significantly different in a couple of ways. Hammurabi used deal making to unite his empire. So the Babylonian cities, he made deals with them. He was a little more tolerant and protective of their customs, tried to incorporate them all into one. But the Hittite rulers, the armies of Babylon, they used bronze weapons. I'm sorry, the Babylonians used bronze weapons, but the Hittites had stronger iron weapons. They had created these iron weapons that could actually destroy the bronze material that the Babylonians were using, and they utilized that in their military force. They were not as tolerant. When they overtook an area, they did it through force, through the use of their army and their iron weapons. So we have Hammurabi in Babylon that is trying to be more politically correct and unify by making deals. And then you have the Hittites who are coming in and they're doing so by force. They're taking over areas by force. Hittites are using iron weapons and the Babylonians are using bronze weapons. Those are a couple differences. We talked about the similarities. Now you want to put that information into your paragraphs. Make sure you're using your book and the lessons that you have. Hopefully you've completed the student guide or the study guide, which is extra credit. You can use that information to help you build this essay. It doesn't have to be a lengthy essay. You don't have to worry so much about your essay structure. I'll help you with that when you submit it. I give you feedback if I think it needs to be revised, and you have that opportunity. But make sure you're getting the information in there and giving it a try. It's worth too many points to just ignore it altogether and not bother doing it. It's always worth a try, and I will be here to help you if you're struggling. All right, if you have any questions, please send them to me via K-mail. I know it's not ideal, but at least we're getting the information. It's giving us the opportunity to still learn this information until we can get Blackboard fixed. Don't lose faith in me, please, and please don't stop trying to come to our lessons. Once Blackboard is fixed, I really need you guys to be there, and I don't want you to fall off the radar because you're frustrated. We'll work through this together. I'm here for you, and I definitely want to continue our lessons. We've had such a good time with them so far. We're learning more about each other. We're learning together. It's fun for me. I hope it's fun for you. So just please, I beg you, don't give up on me. All right, you're going to need your exit ticket, and you have to complete this in order to get credit. So give me just one moment. Okay, I know some of you had issues getting the survey from the YouTube video. I will try it once again to share it with you, but I'll also send it in the K-mail so that you have access to it right away. Make sure you don't just complete it and not watch the lesson. You're not going to do very well on it if that's the case. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will be in touch with you very soon.